Hello and welcome. You are listening to an informed take on current events brought to you by law students and staff of Queen's University Belfast. This is LawPod.
Welcome to LawPod, the podcast of the School of Law here at Queen's University. So I've been looking forward to talking to you not only about your new book, but on yourself. I'd like you to start with a bit of a biography, talk about both your journalistic and your strategic interests, because I think you're also an international relations and geopolitics specialist with a particular interest in the South-Caucasus, but obviously a broader knowledge of the Asian politics as well. So why don't you start with a little potted history of your own life and your professional life in journalism and geopolitics?
Thank you very much, Peter, for this wonderful podcast. I really appreciate, and I also say a big thanks to you for organizing this podcast. So, regarding me, about my career and my biography, I started my journalism career from Pakistan, and till 2009, I was working with Pakistani mainstream English newspapers. But after that, I resigned just because of some principal stands. Because in Pakistani media, there was at that time, the journalists and the journalism were getting huge power, and they were quite influential. But apparently, on the other side, there was the emerging yellow journalism threat there. And I don't think so that being a objective and being a very impartial journalist, it could be suitable to you or anybody else to be a yellow journalist and to sensationalize and to exploit the issues. So according to my principal stand, I left Pakistani media, and after that, since still I did not work with any Pakistani newspaper, just because I think that I am misfit in that media society. So after that, I started working with the international newspaper and also with the international television channels. So I work a series of the international broadcasters, and then I went to be a roving correspondent in South Asia and some other countries I served. But after 2014, my interest take me towards the South-Caucasus, and that is one of the most volatile part. Was the former CIS countries. So that's make me more interesting in this area, because when I visited first time in 2015 in these areas, so at that time, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, nobody knows about even that conflict, that this is a frozen conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I spent some time in Azerbaijan, and during this time, I start preparing my notes about this book, that there should be a book. And then last year, when it became into the international headlines that Armenia and Azerbaijan went into a frontline, very big fight, and the fight was actually broke out on this incident, that was the Tovuz. So I started and I make my mind that I should finish my book, because I was writing with another angle. But of course, when there was the international developments take place, of course, the angle will be a little bit changed.
Malik, just for the benefit of the listeners, could we step back and just describe the geography? We're talking about Armenia and Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh. Just talk about the geography and a little bit about the geopolitical history, the emergence of Nagorno-Karabakh as a contested region or a contested oblast during the Soviet years. Almost from the beginning, there's been a rather contested and conflictual dispute over the identity and the autonomy or the integrity of the region, with conflicting claims between those two interests. But of course, Azerbaijan and Armenia are fractures, aren't they? They are part of the fallout, the fractures that have arisen from the collapse of old empires. So maybe a bit of a geography lesson, and then a little bit of the geopolitical history about how this problem emerged would be very useful for our listeners. Thanks.
So I think it's very interesting to go into the background and the history of this conflict. And mostly these conflicts that emerged, mostly emerged at the time when there was the partition, when there was the disintegration of some major powers. So I will just give you an example of the similar conflict that emerged between India and Pakistan, and that was the Kashmir. So now if you can see the history and the geopolitical of the Kashmir, so it's divided into two parts. One is occupied by Pakistan, the second part, which is occupied by India. Both use the same term against each other, that Pakistan occupied this one, Indian use that Pakistan occupied this one, Pakistan used that India occupied that part. So similarly, when the Soviet was going to be disintegrated and there was the unrest and all this problem was going on at that time, this Nagorno-Karabakh problem started, and abruptly, because there was some ethnic Armenians who have been settled there, and at the same time who were some Azeri people from Azerbaijani nationality people who were living there, and immediately there was this Russian disintegration. It's happened, and after this, immediately you can say that a new government and something like a de facto kind of the government country has been formed, like in the form of the Nagorno Karabakh, which Azerbaijanis don't accept. And the biggest thing is this, which I think that the international resolution, because the United Nations has four resolution on this. So when the United Nations has the four resolution, that the this part is actually the part of the Azerbaijan, because they have moved for resolution. According to that four resolution, I think that at that time the Armenian has less say and less claim as compared to Azerbaijan. So after this conflict, when Russia was disintegrated and Azerbaijan became an independent country, Armenia became Georgia, and all these former CIS countries got independence. So after that, the international powers, of course, exploited this issue according to their own vested interest. But the one issue was this, that the 1 million refugees, because who migrated and who have some Azerbaijani origin, they were purely Azerbaijani nationalities. So they will have to migrate from Nagorno Karabakh while leaving all these places from Azerbaijan, from Nagorno Karabakh to main Baku city, because Baku is one of the largest city in Azerbaijan. So there was a huge influx of the migrants. I mentioned even in my book that how big the migrant crisis for the Azerbaijan to tackle. So this is an overall just like a gist of this history. And then finally, you can say that there was the OSC Minsk group that has been formed to solve this problem peacefully. But unfortunately, I can say that it was not solved through peacefully, and a horrific war witnessed between both the countries. And then Azerbaijan take back its 20% land with the Moscow maneuvering, and you can say that the with the help of the, you can say that the Russia middle consensus.
Okay. In the literature, it's the presentation of the conflict is one where the Armenian majority, I mean, it's the statistics presented are that the Armenian ethnic majority within the Nagorno-Karabakh is up around 99%. And their claim to autonomy, they have a persisting claim to autonomy. I think they've actually named their state, haven't they, as an independent country. How does their claim for autonomy sit in your mind in terms of its legitimacy? Normally the UN, would normally honor a claim by a population that wants to assert its own national integrity in some way. So, what mitigates against that? What do you think undermines or deprives, or should deprive that Armenian population of its legitimacy and its claim to nationhood? Given your own sense of the history and the disputed claims.
Yeah. So actually, if we go to the history and the very long history, because in the short history, the Armenian claims are not as powerful. But if you can go the long history, like 1,000 years or maybe 800 years, so I think that that history is not something like this, because at that time the geopolitics and everything was totally changed according to the today's ground realities. But after this, after the Russia into disintegration, and when the Armenians occupied this Nagorno Karabakh, they tried to settle the Armenian from main Armenian from Armenia towards Nagorno Karabakh, and they try to erase all the proofs and the mosque and the all these things about that belong that could be proved as the footprint of the Azerbaijani origin in this area. So they try to remove each and everything. But still, you can say Aghdam, there is a very big mosque. In all these other cities like Susha, that is one of the cultural capital of the Azerbaijan, because there is the remaining of the Azerbaijani culture. There are very strong proofs. So Azerbaijan, even now in today, they are going to sue Armenia to erasing and to destroying all this historical culture that belong to Azerbaijan. So I think that it could be more better, and I think that that some international experts of the culture and the art and craft and all these things who can have some sort of the knowledge and a better research, they can be in much better position to go and to research and to have some claims on this, that who has the more I think that the historical roots on this area. But I think again it will be very hard uh, to prove that like the 1,000 year history and towards the like 102 year 200 year history, because that is more easy. So according to this recent history, Azerbaijan claims are more powerful as compared to Armenia.
Right. Of course, the leaders of the, is it Artsakh Republic?
Yeah.
They call it the Artsakh.
Yes.
They would also claim, going back hundreds of years, that they have a right to their own nationhood. Of course. Anyway, we know how these histories are mobilized, and there's never a very settled view on these things. Before we look at the detail of the conflict and the geopolitics, do you have a sense of where the solution might lie? What do you think? Some kind of binational agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan might be possible, an overarching geopolitical agreement to sponsor the continuing autonomy, or at least a semi-autonomous status of the region. Is that likely to emerge? Do you think that the two countries are going to have to do a deal and settle their conflict and be joint sponsors or patrons of the Nagorno-Karabakh territory? Is that the likely outcome, do you think?
Yeah. So after this ceasefire agreement that was happened in Russia between Armenia and Azerbaijan, so now I think that the Russian peacekeeping forces are there. So how long they stay there, I think there is some agreement there that they will stay there, and then after that it will be decided there. So according to the current status and the latest situation, I think that the Azerbaijan and some other regional players are trying to make it and bound Armenia to stay this peace deal which happened in Moscow. If I think that this deal is not happened, and if it is not working, I think that then there is again very tense situation will be in the region, and because I think that the Russia priorities and the Russia interests are also changing very fast in the region. Similarly, Turkish footprints has been also seen in this region, because Turkey is trying to revive its Ottoman Empire and all these things that is coming from Ankara. So now I think that I can see that if Turkey and Russia they don't have the conflict of the interest in the region, that I would say that very hard to stop this conflict, because abruptly there will be some sort of the clash, because Russia maybe not be able to bear the Turkish influence in this region, and Turkey is trying to increase its influence every day, every next move. So recently, if you see that President Erdogan have the statement that on the Ukraine, and then after, of course, they have another statement that We are not going to have challenge anything here in the region. We just want some bilateral relation with Ukraine. But of course, I think that Moscow is aware of the Turkish increasing interest and the increasing involvement in the region. So I think that this all future scenario depends on most likely on the Ankara and the Moscow, that how they're going to take all this scenario and the situation. But I don't think so that if any kind of the any partner or any stakeholder will step back from its deal or try to betray this agreement, I think that the situation will be more horrible than we have seen in the recent Tovuz incident between and then
Yes.
the full-fledged war.
Yes. I think what you're saying is sometimes these localized conflicts can be useful and functional from the perspective of the bigger geopolitical players, that it's useful to have the pot boiling in a sense and to have the conflict there to be serviced in the interest of the wider geopolitical disputes. So, in that context, there have been interesting changes in Armenia, for example. I'm just going to ask you to focus now on Armenia. We had the so-called Velvet Revolution, or kind of a democratization, which came as a bit of a surprise in the region, really, in Armenia. But then we have this democratic movement, changes then in relations with Russia, um, tilt towards Europe, and still they ended up got into a conflict again with Azerbaijan. I'm trying to understand how a democratized region ends up in a hot war again. Why does what are the geopolitics of Armenia, and what are the influences on Armenia and the perceptions of its relationships with Russia?
the the Velvet Revolution, I think that is a very drop scene of the Velvet Revolution of the Nicholas Pashinyan, which he showed to his people. But now the problem is this, that the economic challenges are very big for the Armenia right now, and there is a lot of, I think that the desperate people are desperate after this war, and they are also not happy with Moscow. They try to move to all the other countries like the West and the US, but they also did not get any substantial help from the West. So I think in the public, I think that there is not some good views that could be towards the Moscow. So this is, I think that I could say that it could be a not a good point, that mean that Russia and Armenia has been a very long-term ally, and I think all the military needs have been fulfilled from the Moscow. So I think that Armenia, and not only Armenia but all these CIS countries, they are not in a position to challenge Moscow in any case. It's very simple, that to challenge Moscow is mean that they are going to put stake on their national interest and everything. And so for Armenia also similarly, I can say that they are not much in a position to bargain on this phenomena of the pro-Russia, or something like have distant from the Russia, and on this they could bargain with the European countries or the United States. So as far as this, according to this current economic challenges, and after this, right now the situation is not very good. So the problem is this, that Armenia is a landlocked country. So, and they have, according to the Azerbaijani perspective and the Azerbaijani narrative, Azerbaijan want to be dependent Armenia on this corridor that is good. They want to open is the Nakhchivan corridor, and they are trying that this is the last chance for Armenia to change their fate. So now it's depend on the Armenians, that how they take this matter, how they accept this offer, that because that could be only possible, that corridor could only be operational in this case when they accept the uh, Azerbaijani influence and all this Azerbaijani territory that is Nagorno-Karabakh, and then they can use this corridor. And in that case, I think that it is a little bit maybe hard for Armenians, because it's mean that they have accepted everything, and they are going to use that corridor. It's a very peaceful country, and then they start a very good relation between both Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I think that Armenia have very less option right now in their hand. And the one thing is this, that which I think that the planning and all this, the geostrategical approach of the Nicholas Paginian was not correct, because this was not the time to have to challenge Azerbaijan, a military which is more powerful than Armenia, and to the attack like this in Tovuz, in which Armenia challenged completely. I think that is not a and that is not a wise decision from any sitting prime minister.
And it would be interesting to say a little bit more about that, because I know that your book reflects on your own anticipation back in July 2020, wasn't it, when the attack in Tovuz occurred. You could see that it was an escalation that was likely to lead to the all-out war that followed in September. What were the motivations? Do you think it was purely a distraction from the economic problems within Armenia, or was there ever a realistic chance of trying to shift the balance in favor of Armenia? That doesn't seem likely, given the modernization of Azerbaijan's armed forces.
Yeah, so actually that was a miscalculation. I can say that that was the miscalculation of the Armenian prime minister, because when he hit inside Azerbaijan, 12th July, Taos, in which the high-profile military personnel of Azerbaijan died. So it's mean that the perception and what was in the Armenian prime minister Nicholas Paginian in their mind, it was in their mind that, okay, we are doing this escalation, and after that immediately Russia will come and they will say, oh, ceasefire and something like that. But actually that was not happened, and this was actually all triggered one by one, and then immediately, because there was a huge pressure even in Azerbaijan, because the people comes out from their homes, and there was a huge pressure on the Azerbaijan president that to take the revenge. And after that they don't have any option, and then we can see after days and days that we see that, first of all, we listen the news that Azerbaijan has occupied and retake some mountain areas near Nagorno Karabakh, and then because some media because I was also observing the international media, some international media carried this, that okay, maybe this is a correct, or this is a true news or not. But then I think that all the international media started carrying the stories that Dash Azerbaijan started retaking these areas. So these were actually, it was not. I say these things times and again, that this was not a timely and a very accurate move by the Armenian prime minister. It was the biggest mistake, which have changed the whole chess game, complete chess game. This one move has changed all the chessboard, and it's all went against Armenia.
So the outcome of the war between September and November, wasn't it? Armenia actually lost territory around Nagorno-Karabakh. They lost access to the corridor, and they had prisoners taken, of course, as well. The calculations from Azerbaijan's perspective, was there any? Did they act unilaterally, or do you think their involvement was as much a product of Russian and Turkish interests once the opportunity arose after the July intervention? I mean, can you explain the conflict, in other words, purely from Azerbaijan's interests? I mean, did they act out of their own strategic interest, or was the conflict somehow prompted or useful to the wider players in the region at that point?
Yeah, I think Azerbaijan, on some decisions, they are the sole decision makers, and on some things, like of course they have a huge backing from the Turkey. Even Turkish drone has been game changer in this war, but not only Turkish drone, because I am not saying that the only Turkish drone has changed this everything. No, because Azerbaijan has a huge money, and they are purchasing weapon from the many countries. They are purchasing weapon from Israel. They are purchasing weapon from other Russia, many other countries. They are purchasing the weapon. So of course, there was the huge influence of the Turkey, and similarly, because Azerbaijan is not in a position to offend Russia, it's not possible for Azerbaijan. And similarly, they are not in a position that they will not listen Ankara on this thing, because Ankara is one of the, I think that the major partner, and I think due to Turkey they have these days in which they have retaken the back this territory. So of course, Azerbaijan have huge influence from both sides, from Moscow and from Ankara. But of course, they have their own choice on this, because if Azerbaijan the leadership will not decide to go something like very hard reaction, and to give a very tit for tat of the Tovuz incident, of course, they will not be able to take back these lands.
Yeah. Finally, Malik, tell me, at the heart of geopolitical interests in any region, one usually comes back to the question of energy and access to resources like gas and oil. Can you just outline, and especially in the context of the role of Azerbaijan and the access to the Caspian Sea, can you maybe describe the significance of the conflict and the risks around any elevation of the conflict in the context of the energy politics, the energy geopolitics of the region? Because that seems to explain a lot of those wider interests at the moment.
Of course, that this is, I think that the Azerbaijan revenue and the Azerbaijan capital, I think it's highly dependent on the oil and gas, and they are, I think that they are one of those countries who are highly dependent on this thing, and mostly they have the Western clients of this oil and gas. So and Turkey also. So of course that even Moscow even eyes on these resources, and but there is not any chance of some sort of the conflict on the energy resources. But because Azerbaijan have the very strong capability and capacity to hold of its sovereign control, and similarly they have the, I think, a very strong hand on their energy resources. So I don't think so that in near future or something like that they would allow any regional partner to grab their energy resources, and because they are quite smart in this thing, to utilizing their energy resources between east and west. So, and
Yes.
similarly, if Azerbaijan don't have the energy resources, of course they don't have this huge capital, and they don't have such a strong army, which currently they are going to develop. And I think that a strong army actually is the guarantee of your protection of the strong energy resources.
Yes, because energy and access to oil and gas coming through Azerbaijan is probably Europe's main interest in the area, isn't it? Because Europe has wanted to reduce its reliance on Russian-controlled uh, pipelines, and and the risk, of course, is that the more that Russia exerts or continues to um, exert its influence, even over Azerbaijan's activity, then Europe remains somewhat hostage to the politics of the region.
Exactly. This is the point.
Very good. Now, tell me, I understand that there were claims during after the conflict between September and November that there were atrocities. Uh, that some soldiers were executed after they had been captured. The UN has expressed concerns about some of the activities. Has there been an investigation? Has the Minsk process or the UN launched an investigation into those incidents?
I think it's reported from both sides. I have saw some news, and I think that it should be, some international authorities should accountable and make an investigation from both sides. And I think that this is quite inhumane and the wild thing, that the execution of the soldier in the name of the revenge. I think that is quite comes into the war crime. And I think that any country who is responsible, they should have to be treated according to international law.
And the situation at the moment with the Minsk process has the corridor, which is now patrolled by Russian soldiers. I think there's even some Turkish support. the corridor between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, has that reopened? Is there now access between Armenia and the Nagorno-Karabakh region?
Yeah, I think it's not fully operational, no, but the peace missions are only Russian forces. I think there is not, I think, that any other country forces. And the OSCE Minsk group, I think that okay, that these guys have a very, I think that the very awkward moment because I think their delegation have visited Azerbaijan president, and I think that he asked him that the conflict is resolved now. So I think that the OSCE Minsk group desperate all these. Even the you can say that Azerbaijan and even the all other stakeholders, because they were not they did not make any substantial or any concrete actions on this conflict, and I think that it was formed, I think, many years, and but they don't have any output. So I think that this is a quite disparate thing from coming from the OSCE Minsk group. Yeah.
Oh, I see. All right. So really, the intervention that brought an end to the conflict was really a Russian intervention rather than a Minsk group. You don't think the Minsk process has much credibility or traction within the region itself?
No, OSCE Minsk group, actually the mandate which they have given, and the mandate that they had, they did not serve according to that mandate, because the people of the Azerbaijan have and similarly other stakeholders have the very high expectation from the OSCE Minsk group. But since I was observing this issue, I have only listened that OSCE chaired this meeting and this meeting and this meeting. So I think that that could be more like meetings kind of the stuff rather than some concrete plan and some actions. Mostly some are very typical bureaucratic style and something bureaucratic kind of the working, I think. So maybe they have some quite limitations. I'm not fully aware about the inside mechanism of the OSCE Minsk group, but apparently what is a general perception about the OSCE Minsk group is this, that they did not really deliver very well in this conflict, and now even there is a question mark on the future that what next conflict they are going to resolve. Yeah.
Malik, thank you very much. That's been fascinating just to get your perspective. And can I wish you the best of luck with the book?
Yeah, thank you so much, even for your great support and for your forwards. I think that the most I appreciate is for this book.
Okay, thank you very much and good luck.